Well, thanks for that introduction to JP who put that together. We are rebranding this podcast. This is Jeanne Ives and this is The Real Story. We're here to talk about, again, of course, COVID this week. Why? Because we've had a massive shift in what's happening here in the state of Illinois, especially in schools, after that court order came down on February 4th, that temporary restraining order saying that essentially, guess what? The governor's rules surrounding masking of children in schools is not only illegal, it's evil, and therefore it's void. So after that ruling, you saw in the span of just a couple days, hundreds of school districts decide that they are going to go mask optional. That fight continued all through the week. We kind of recapped that in our last podcast that we had Paul Vallis in. Well, we have even more important information to bring with you, as a number of larger school districts in the suburbs here have also decided to go mask optional over this weekend, surprisingly. Gee, I wonder, Naperville 203, I wonder if that had something to do with the fact that your school district, again, received national attention for their bad behavior. And this is in regards to that heartfelt comment by that father. And I think we played the clip for you in a previous podcast. But his heartfelt comments about his daughter, who suffered some intellectual drawbacks and not wanting to put the mask on. And then you guys continuing to mask her. And just his comments saying, you know what, I'm sorry that I've not paid attention, but I'm awake now and I am paying attention. So his comments went viral. Of course, they were featured on Tucker Carlson. And I think after that, I think it was, game over for Naperville 203. Of course, it took him the rest of the week to come to that. It took a lot more emails and activism by the parents in that school district. But on a Sunday, Naperville 203 had an emergency board meeting for 2 hours on Sunday morning. They adjourned without making a decision, but then later on that day, of course, what popped up on their website is the fact that they are going to go mask optional beginning Tuesday. Now, I'm recording this podcast right now. It is Monday when I'm recording this, but they essentially said, okay, we give up. We're going to go mask optional. So that's good news. Then later on that day, Naperville 204 or Indian Prairie 204, which has got a large chunk of Naperville in it, they decided to go with mask optional, but not until February 22nd. So you've got these bigger school districts now deciding to go mask optional. It looks like D86 is headed that way as well. They had quite a ruckus at their school board meeting earlier that week. So keep the pressure up, parents. It is working. Probably it became game over for them when on February 8th, the governor, after saying, I'm appealing the mask mandate in schools, I'm appealing that decision by the court, by Judge Grischow, I'm appealing that decision, probably when he came out then just a couple days later and said, oh, hey, guess what? We're going to go masks optional. We're going to get rid of the statewide mask mandate, except for in particular areas, including schools, but it's all going to go away February 28th. I think the school districts kind of looked at themselves and said, what is going on here? We're not that stupid that we don't understand that our students are the least vulnerable population in this whole COVID episode. And we've got a governor who is going to lift the mask mandate statewide except in schools. I mean, come on. I think they got embarrassed by that. I think they had no place to go but to lift the mask mandate. Unfortunately, there are some school districts still doing that. There's some school districts like Fremont School District that said, well, we're going to go 100% remote. We're so afraid of this. There's other school districts like Chicago Public Schools who, in the midst of all this uproar, the Chicago Public Schools administration made a deal with the Chicago Teachers Union that they would remain in masks until August 1st. And now that looks like it's going to go to another lawsuit as to determine whether or not that is a valid position for them to have, whether or not their contract that was done in the midst of a COVID crisis, whether or not that supersedes state law that says it's a violation of due process to mask particular people. So I listened to an interview this morning with Tom DeVore on that very issue. And he said, you know, for the teachers that joined into my lawsuit to also become unmasked, just like the students, perhaps if they signed on to a union agreement saying that they would remain masked, perhaps they don't have the same way out. But certainly there's no way in Tom DeVore's mind, there's no way when you look at the law that the teacher union's contract should be able to inflict any sort of requirement on the students themselves. They don't make a contract with the teachers union. So that'll be an interesting to see how that's how that progresses. But back to this February 8th press conference here. It was remarkable. You had Governor Pritzker speak, you had Dr. Ezeki speak, and then you had another doctor, Dr. Emily Landon, who is apparently another one of these health experts that Pritzker keeps around to bolster up his side of the argument. And she's actually a University of Chicago doctor. I personally think if you're a graduate of that institution, she does not serve you well. First of all, I'm going to just play about a 1.5-minute clip of her. Listen to the sing-songing kindergarten teacher voice that she uses in telling everybody else how we should feel about COVID, like we can't read for ourselves or something. JP, if you want to, if you could play the clip with her, that'd be great.
Make no mistake, Illinois, today is not the day to stop the mask mandate. And that's why it's not happening today. There are still way too many cases, but things are changing quickly. They're improving. Many have asked for a metric or a number that will guide the rules and regulations, but each wave of this pandemic has had different characteristics, different behavior, and no single metric has been able to reliably predict the outcomes and the trajectory of each of the variants. Smart physicians, scientists, epidemiologists, and public health officials are going to disagree about which metric to use and the exact date to repeal mandates and rules. This kind of discourse is good. It shows that we have a diverse community of experts that are considering all the angles. And the one thing that we all agree on is the need to aggressively respond to new threats on the horizon with precautionary measures. And then once our modelers and epidemiologists are able to reliably predict a trajectory, we have to begin then to shape a strategy for undoing some of those mitigations and mandates. Preparing to repeal statewide masking mandates at the end of the month is aggressive and optimistic, but it's also reasonable. This does not mean that no one needs to wear a mask anymore. It's an acknowledgement that cases have fallen to an acceptable or manageable level.
Okay, so you heard that. Cases have fallen to an acceptable and manageable level. That, you know, we have a diversity of opinion here about how, you know, how to read into COVID. And that magically, though we think that February 28th sounds like the date, we're going to get rid of it. Well, what happened to following the data, following the science? I mean, here's the reality. And WirePoints, thank you so much for your work. From the very beginning, you knew it was important to track these important metrics on case fatality, number of cases, number of hospital beds, number of people in the ICU from COVID, number of people vaccinated. You've been keeping track of all of it, so we can actually go back very easily and look at the numbers. Well, if you're saying that the cases are getting more manageable, that everything's more manageable, I have a problem with that, because you lifted the mask mandate. Remember this, in June of 2021, we lifted everything. And then we went back and we closed back down as soon as we saw Delta surging. And but now that we have Omicron, which apparently is more transmissible, but not as big of a problem in terms of its virility, its severity rather, you guys you need to get out of this. And by the way, it's not any scientific calendar, and there's nothing, I mean, what's the science in a calendar to begin with? No, it's a political calendar. It's a political calculus that you're making. Because when you look at the metrics in terms of number of hospitalizations for COVID right now, number of people in ICU beds right now from COVID, when you look at all of that, which are really the big metrics that matter. We are worse now than we were when you lifted the mask mandate in June. So, but you're going to just magically lift it anyway in 2 weeks. It's such an arbitrary date. If anybody, can anybody see through this, that on March 1st we have the state of delusion, or the State of the Union address by President Biden? Is there any correlation at all? Well, I think that there is, and I think most people think that there is. I think they know that we're just tired of this, that we don't see any value in it, that there's been study after study after study that say that these masks don't work, including The Atlantic, which is a left-leaning publication that has essentially said the same, that the masks don't work. And now you're finally coming to that, figuring that out. People are a lot smarter than these politicians give us credit for. And we're not in the mood to take it anymore, not to mention the enormous amount of hypocrisy that we have had over this entire situation as well. You saw the Super Bowl, right? Apparently they were supposed to be all being masked, but I didn't see a single mask out there when I was watching the Super Bowl. The other thing is that, did you notice the difference in the commercials? And we're going to try and pull a couple of these for my next podcast. But do you remember back to Super Bowl 2021 and the commercials that you saw? And anytime there was a setting that was indoors, frequently there were people wearing masks, or there was a disclaimer saying that this commercial was filmed using social distancing because they were supposed to be masked indoors. So there was a disclaimer put on some of these commercials. And what'd you see last night if you watched the Super Bowl? None of that. I didn't see a single commercial except for one that was about specific hospitals and was obviously supposedly filmed or made to look like it was filmed in a hospital setting. They had masks on. That's the only commercial I saw. So are we going to get rid of all these insurance company commercials that have people walking around in masks? I hope so. I mean, it was just ridiculous to begin with that they went that far to play into the hysteria, but they did. So that's how it stands right now. You've got a number of school districts. You've got well over 500 school districts now that have decided to go mask optional. You've got still a lot of resistance, though, going around in the suburbs here. We've got resistance. So there's going to be, there's still rallies going around. There's protest rallies going around. There's rallies going around saying, show us your smile rally. That's tomorrow. And it's basically there to either thank your school district for going mask optional or encourage them to do so. That was all started by Annie Fry. She's a downstate radio show host. So we're going to take a little break here. We're going to go back a little bit. I want to share this article by a Northern Illinois University teacher. And he talks about COVID and what he saw in the hypocrisy at that particular institution. Be right back with you.